Okay, we're continuing with the book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers, in alphabetical order. We're doing Francis Schaeffer. He was a preacher, sort of a Protestant preacher, and he emphasized the relationship between Christianity and art. And he really emphasized, he died back in 1984, but he put a strong emphasis on the idea that, man is created in the image of God, therefore man too can be a creator. We honor God by creating beautiful art, literature and everything else. And so I like that idea as a teacher, and I think, as other people have said, even Nietzsche said this, it is man's creative endeavors that help to raise him above, the beasts, the animals. Aristotle had said that which is most godlike of man is his ability to think, to reason. Others have said it's our ability to speak in language. So all of those things elevate us, and they're good to be used in a good way. So anyways, here's a couple quotes of Francis Schaeffer. He who loses the arts loses the culture. And currently, the Christian man, the modern man, has lost. Modern art has taken over, and it's a disgrace. It's fake. It's the emperor's new clothes. It's garbage. And it's done to humiliate the public. To say that kind of crap somebody, a child could do, throwing paint on a canvas, is art, it's nonsense. And the fact that the public submits to it, that's what's so bad. You know what I mean? The public submits and says, okay, those are our art museums. No, they're a freaking insult and a disgrace, and you should not ever accept that, because when you start accepting one major insult and degradation after another, pretty soon you're totally insulted and degraded, all right? Next quote, Christianity by Francis Schaeffer. Christianity is not just involved with salvation, but with the total man and the total world. Christianity is not a series of truths in the plural, but it is rather truth spelled with a capital T. Truths about total reality, not just religious things. Christianity is the greatest intellectual system that the mind has ever touched. And that's an important thing. See, people, in these modern young people, they think, they're interested in science and objective truth and not this religious stuff. What you don't understand is science comes from the Catholic Church. That's well proven. I've gone over that a ton in my other lectures. And I'm also going to go farther than that. I'm going to say you cannot have real science without Christian ethics. I say that based on having spent my entire life in science. Okay, I can tell you the vast majority of what people think is science is not really science. It's just stuff a corporation pays people with degrees to lie about. Okay, that's why almost all the influencers on the internet are promoting nonsense, paleo, keto, and Mediterranean diet, because they're paid to do it, okay? And what I'm trying to say, that's why 85% of cancer research is not reproducible, because they're paid to generate certain results. Once you throw out Christian ethics, which says, like the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not lie, you're going to end up with a chaos, and it all becomes a joke. Look at the Harvard nutrition pyramid, where they put oils as the foundation of the diet. That's like the worst food. It's poison, okay? And that's what you get when you have non-Christian ethics science that's paid for. Just nonsense, okay? And, the average poor, stupid pro, they'll base their decisions on that. And as Ayn Rand said, if a man bases his decisions on incorrect information, he becomes his own destroyer. And that's what we see in most people. Like they say, most men dig their own grave with a fork and a knife. Okay, Francis Schaeffer continues. Man has value because he is made in the image of God. If man is not made in the image of God, then nothing stands in the way of inhumanity. Without Christian ethics, that man is created in the image of God, let's call it Bible ethics, man is created in the image of God, then atheistic Darwinism takes over. And atheistic Darwinism says he's just a talking primate, a talking monkey. He has no rights. He's not entitled to anything. Believe me, you want natural rights. Christianity is the greatest friend the little guy ever had relative to the power of the ruler. You want it if you care about freedom. Do you think your life has any meaning? Then you want it. Okay, then you intrinsically sort of believe it. Because without it, your life has no meaning and you have no rights and you're just basically a farm animal owned by the ruler. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth of it. Okay? Without Christianity, the ruler can say, look, I want your wife and your daughter in my bed tomorrow, and you have no say in the matter. And by the way, I'm going to feed you to my dogs, and you have no say in the matter. How can you argue with that? You're just a farm animal. The ruler owns you. He can do whatever he wants. You have no say. And if you think atheism is okay, then you're agreeing with that statement. It's just a fact. There's no way around this. This has been known for hundreds of years. This has been known for thousands of years, but the average prole doesn't know this, and that's why the average prole is going to be forced into slavery, because they're too stupid to understand what their options are. Kind of saddens me because I'm going to get dragged into it too because of all these dummies, okay? All right, let us continue. If there is no absolute moral standard, then one cannot say in a final sense that anything is right or wrong. By absolute, we mean that which always applies, that which provides a final or ultimate standard. There must be an absolute if there are to be morals, and there must be an absolute if there are to be real values. Take a look at B.F. Skinner. He says that autonomous man does not exist, and that it is the task of behavioral psychology to abolish the conception of autonomous man. B.F. Skinner declares that everything man is, everything man makes, everything man thinks is completely 100% determined by his environment. So that's determinism. That's also like Calvinism and predestination. That's why I don't go for that nonsense. Man has free will, volition, to make choices. He needs to try to accumulate good information so he can base his choices based on good information. But I'm letting you know, B.F. Skinner, who was highly sanctioned by rulers, was trying to figure out how to control everything you do by just rewards and punishments. And that's how you train an animal. B.F. Skinner goes a step farther. He subordinates the genetic factor and suggests that man's behavior can be almost totally controlled by controlling the environment. Within the Skinnerian system, there are no ethical controls. There is no boundary limit to what can be done by those in whose hand the control resides. Okay, so some of these things are just my thoughts. Atheism uses Darwin as its creation story, and it will go right into this stuff. That man's a talking monkey, and this will lead into population control, the idea of no free will, and a return to slavery. It's obvious. That's why rulers want it. They want slaves, okay? They want to have a different concubine every single day of the year. If you give them atheism, you give them total power, and you as an individual have no rights. Okay. Schaeffer continues. The Bible celebrates man creating art that honors God. Okay. The name of one of his books is called L'Abri, How Then Should We Live? Okay. Here's some more thoughts on him. We already know all this stuff. Science arose out of Christianity. The cathedral schools leading to the cathedral universities, leading to scholasticism with, Albert the Great, his mentor, and then Thomas Aquinas, calling men back down from thinking about theology, life, the afterlife, to thinking about life here on earth and honoring God by studying nature and science. Like Kepler said, I'm simply thinking God's thoughts after him. Okay, and the Christian principle that God is a rational God and he made a rational universe, therefore we could learn to understand it. Okay? And Schaeffer says when you get rid of God, then you get rid of man. You make him no longer something special as a human. You make him just a talking ape. And he points out, too, Voltaire called himself the father of the Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment was really not progress to be enlightened by reason. It was to go backwards. The French Rev, 1789 to 1894, that's what you get with atheism. You get the guillotine, and then right next to it you get 50,000 heads, okay? That's what you get with atheism and reason, okay? That's the type of science. Robespierre was like a disciple of Rousseau. Rousseau was a madman. He was crazy. He's a guy who talks about ethics and how to raise children, and all 5 of his kids, he sends them to an orphanage, and they probably all died back in those days. But that's what a monster Rousseau was, okay? And yeah, Voltaire was funny, he was very clever, but in the end, he's not a good thinker either, because you can't unify people around atheism. Atheism says life has no meaning. So if you say life has no meaning, how does that unify people? How does that help people? No, it gives the ruler total power to just treat them like farm animals. That's what it does. And you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. Just look at the history of Rome. It's obvious. It's like I'm always amazed at why is this a challenge to think, okay? All right, there's more stuff from Francis Schaeffer. A lot of it's religious stuff. Anything here interesting for us in general? One was that the early Renaissance was largely Aristotelian as influenced by the scholastics, but the later Renaissance became more and more heavily influenced by Plato as funded by the Medici for scholars like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola, but they still were trying to unify things in a good way. Aristotle's more influenced by particulars and examples, Plato by universals. Okay, fine. Wycliffe in England and Huss, sort of like in Bohemia, were the ideas of the Reformation, but Luther and Calvin then actualized them. Michelangelo propped up paganism with the Sibyls in the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Dante did some similar things in Divine Comedy, but I think that's part of being a good writer, is that you appreciate the ancient Greeks and Romans, okay? And Christianity goes just fine with them. It coexisted with paganism for 500 years. Okay, Phillip Schaeffer, he's another religious guy. He says to give up faith, to give up faith in Christ is to give up faith in humanity. Yeah, you say that man's just an animal is what the default position is. He says if Christians are ever to be united, they must be united in Christ. And so what I would say about that is people say, well, why can't we just have Christianity without Christ? And I don't think you can't. He's the concretization of Christianity. To teach people, they have to know the story of Christ. And Christ is what makes it all meaningful and puts it together. So, you don't have to be a Christian, but you got to have Christian ethics in terms of saying, man is created in the image of God, therefore partly divine, therefore you should not abuse him. You should be nice to him. You have to be kind and fair to the average poor, pathetic person. Because most people are poor and stupid, okay? And they really have no ability to defend themselves, to protect themselves, or anything. So they're totally dependent on the will of others. So you have to have a society where you're nice to those people. Otherwise, most people will get abused because most people are helpless. It's just a fact. Anyways, I hope you found that helpful.